My name is TraverMudzonga. I'm a member of the Golden Key at the University of the Witwatersrand Johannesburg chapter, and I would like to share some reflections. My work within the arts has been an interplay between visual arts, theatre, marketing, administration, and critical thought. And during this reflective session, I'd like to focus on three areas. Firstly, my creative processes as a way of introduction. And then I'll move into what I'm currently calling a reflective gaze. And then finish up with intellectual property within the creative economy. So my processes, when I say that my work is an interplay between visual arts and theatre, I trained in my undergrad with what traditionally was regarded as studio arts. I took up photography, graphic design, ceramics, textile design, drawing and painting. And from there, from the visual arts discipline, evolved into set theatre design. And I think set theatre design provided a space where the studio arts would have a home in. And then from there, I began to be drawn in filling up a gap within the theatre industry of business development, in-house marketing, in-house design, in-house graphic design and marketing. And from then on, it began to go within the advertising industry. So I then completely moved from being a visual artist, from being a set theatre designer, to being an art director. And in this, when I look at my creative processes, they always start as an idea and a process of wanting to make that idea mean something, whether be it based on a client brief or be based on an emotion, on processes that I want to express and turn into creativity and turn into artwork for my own place, for my own walls. And I think that process of making it mean something for me is central to my different creative processes approach. And shifting from the creative processes and the creative work, I then move on to what I'm calling a reflective gaze. And my professional gaze has shifted towards how creatives commodify their artistic works and services. And this gaze is critically investigating Southern Africa as a geographical location, but in particular, intellectual property approaches within Southern Africa. And just to speak back into how I've arrived at intellectual property within the arts and as part of commodifying creative services and projects, is just a reductive definition of intellectual property, quote unquote, as original creations of the mind. And intellectual property is protected by law in all the Southern African countries. It is territorial, so it is country-based. It affords privileges for a set limited time frame for those who own the rights to the work. And for me, this gaze is driven by an appreciation of intellectual property being intricately related to ownership, trade, competition, industrial growth, and economic development. And there are a number of scholars whose work really delve into aspects of intellectual property within the arts and culture. And to name just two of them, Throsby 2001 and Towse 2008. But it is important to also highlight that during my research in 2018, that I also came across a report by the South African Cultural Observatory. The 2018 report also highlights the reality of how creatives commodify their intellectual property is not empirically known, which for me presents not only an area of research, but an area of curiosity. To say, if we're saying intellectual property, the laws and approaches, economy, the commodification of creative products and services, how come research and policy is not drafted based on empirical data that speaks to how people are exploiting their intellectual property? And when I say my reflective gaze is on the commodification of creative products and services, artistic works, it has landed on the three areas in which creatives commodify their artistic work. It's through collection of royalties. If they've published a book and they've a publishing deal, they're paid through royalties. Or licensing. The musicians, when we go and stream their music from any online platform or buy an actual CD, we are buying a license, in essence, a license to listen for however period you have subscribed to stream. That's why when that license has expired, then you cannot listen to that music again. And other aspects, it's a total resale of the rights, the work, and everything that they sell, that they have been commissioned to say, here, I have this event, I need you to come and either be the in-house graphic designer. So the creative go and create graphic works in an advertising agency, but they don't own the work, it belongs to the employer. Or a freelance is hired as a photographer, and they're commissioned to create artistic pieces and they're paid. And the assumption here is that when creatives are selling their intellectual property rights and the product, is that they have included in the fee an aspect that covers the acquisition of the rights. Whether the fee is fair or lucrative, that's a discussion for another platform. But when I look at this, then I begin to have this great curiosity of that if the intellectual property, the approaches, the policies, the laws, the framework affect the creative economy at national level and at regional level, then more needs to be done to maximize benefits for everyone on the value chain, in the production of value and in the accumulation of value. And for me, this has then become a keen research interest area for me when I begin to grapple with How are creatives in Southern Africa making the most of digital connectedness to realize maximum possible economic benefits in a digital connected global economy? At the heart of this inquiry that I'm grappling with, the vividness of this reflective gaze that I have is not about money only. It's not about starving or struggling artists. It's not about fighting producers or someone else who might be acquiring rights to secure a return on their investment within the arts. But this gaze is more on the environment where all the players and stakeholders flourish. At the heart of this inquiry that I'm grappling with, at the center of my reflective gaze, is a desire for different stakeholders pulling their corner so that the environment that creative work is produced, that creative work is birthed, that creative work is authored, that creative work is commodified, increases success rates, not only from a business point of view, but from a creative process point of view, that it facilitates a space where creatives are motivated, inspired, remunerated, and rewarded for being creative. And a space where those who invest within the creative industries have minimum standards of guaranteed return on investment, where those who craft policies, be it cultural policies, economic policies, trade economies, that when they sit to craft such policies, the arts and culture cease to be a mystery and become a viable national contributor to the economy, so that the creative economy as an ecosystem transitions from being an academic concept to being a practical, lived praxis, where in Southern Africa we begin to say what works for us, how does it work for us, and how can what works for us begin to breathe life into the policies, into the frameworks of how we commodify creative products and services. And I think it's important that when I am reflecting on the commodification of artistic works, to highlight that in resonating with what Caplan and Ullo 2013 argue, that understanding of intellectual property makes it easier for businesses to then commercially exploit their intellectual property to both promote growth and gain competitive advantages. And here for me, I think the pandemic has sobered my reflective gaze and brought clarity in the role that digital technologies can play across Southern Africa. That as creatives, we can still create within our cultural context, be of great impact locally, but also tap into the global economy, which digital connectedness provides for us. The pandemic has made me realize that most of my acquaintances who are in the music business and those who are in live acts and live performances felt an immediate impact of the pandemic because they could no longer earn an income. And many began to look at streaming and digital alternatives as a stopgap measure to say, I need to plug in these cancelled gigs. I need an income. And I think from where I'm sitting, I'm thinking the pandemic has simply highlighted a process that has been happening at a snail pace. And this process is that digital technologies are with us, are embedded in our works, are embedded in our ways of life. We simply need to now maximize and make the most of digital connectedness and digital technologies, both in the process of creating, in the process of developing audiences, and above all, in the process of commodifying artistic works. That it can no longer be a side hustle for when live shows are cancelled. And I think that's the space I'm currently finding myself in, where on a personal level, I find that where I used to create 90% of the time, now I'm finding I'm creating less than 40% of the time. And that is in relation to artistic works. And the 60% has now shifted into research. And for me, I believe that research gives birth to innovation. And yes, I still create, and yes, I still consider myself a creative. And I believe that research and innovation, particularly into the commodification of artistic work, is important for me as a professional creative. I think this reflective gaze does not take away from the other non-commercial values of arts and culture. This is not to say so. It does not take away from all the other intrinsic values, but it simply adds to the complexities and layers that is arts and culture, that the other side is the business. And I think that's where I'm currently at. It's an interesting journey. It's an ongoing journey. I do not have it all figured out, but I'm grappling and inquiring, and my research is really rooted now within the creative economy, within the commodification of artistic work. And I think my Twitter account is mostly dedicated to this. It's a space of inquiry, including my pinned tweet. It speaks to the ongoing reflective gaze on the creative economy, on intellectual property, on commodification of arts and culture. And I thank you.